This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and we are all about helping construction business owners and leaders create freedom, impact, and wealth. In this episode, you're going to hear an interview with a friend and client, Mikhail Gannage from Central California, and you'll hear about his story, how he gets started, and here are a few things you're going to take away from this podcast. What Mikhail calls the second set of eyes concept that he learned from working in robotics engineering. His advice for second generation business owners. There's one thing that's a little counterintuitive that is exponentially more important in a family business than in other businesses. It might surprise you. Mikhail talks about how a train is always failing and what you can learn from that. How and why you might want to depersonalize failure on your team and even celebrate it. The problems that come from having your company vision and your processes locked away in your head, focusing on what you know you can do better. There are a few things that have helped Mikhail sleep better at night that might surprise you. We talk about when the best way to be profitable is not to focus on profitability. Mikhail talks about why just because they'll write a check and sign a contract doesn't mean they get to be a client. And we spend some time talking about some things that Mikhail has cracked the code on, specifically the flex track and the problems it can solve for you. Lots of good stuff here. I have a few resources I want to share with you before we jump into that interview. If you own a construction business, I want you to imagine this. Imagine that your team is solving problems quickly with fewer mistakes and without you. In other words, they're taking ownership. Your phone is ringing a lot less with questions, you're getting a lot fewer emails, and fewer problems are landing in your lap. You have time to think, time to operate strategically and be proactive. You have time and the mental bandwidth to work on the business instead of being stuck working in it. Your projects run more smoothly. They start on time. There are fewer fires to put out, and you finish them on schedule. You know what you want your business to look like 2 years in the future, and you have a plan to get there. If that sounds good to you, I would invite you to check out my free online training workshop titled Get Out of Your Business, How to Make It Run Without You This Year. You can watch it free by going to constructionleadingedge.com/get out. Here's what you'll get out of this webinar. You'll learn your first few crucial steps if you want to spend more time working on your business instead of being stuck working in it. You'll learn 3 things you should absolutely do before you make your next hire. You'll learn a proven process to design your construction business for the future, how to motivate your team to take more ownership and solve problems without you, and a lot more. You can watch the free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. And if you want to work with my team to systematize your construction business, go to that link, watch the video, and click the button to schedule your strategy call with my team. As a contractor, you manage a ton of jobs every day, and trying to keep up to speed and ensure work actually gets done takes up way too much time. And that's where Company Cam comes in. Every photo and video your guys take at a job is automatically organized by location and instantly synced from the field to wherever you are. Now, you'll know exactly what's happening across your company, be able to communicate more effectively, and cover your butt from future claims. Document your jobs, communicate with your crews, and protect your company, all with Company Cam, the only app every contractor needs. Get started today at companycam.com/CLE. All right, now let's jump into my interview with Mikhail Gannage. Enjoy. Right, Mikhail Gannage, thanks for being on the podcast. So let's start with this. Tell us a little bit about your business, where you're located, and what kind of work you do.
All right. Well, good to see you, Todd. I am located on the central coast of California. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's literally halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. I'm, as we claim, as far away from the metropolitan area as I can get and still be in California. So some of the blessing and challenges of my business model is that we live in a more rural environment. And so we have to travel to get to things, and we have to put a high demand on getting good help. That's not impossible, but it's a challenge to overcome. We run a residential design and build company. We predominantly do custom remodel renovations where we're coming in and reinventing somebody's home for them. We also do new builds, but more typically we're going to be dealing with a lot of the remodel world. We are third generation doing this. My grandfather was actually on the contractors board in the state of Michigan. And then when my father came to San Luis Obispo, which is San Luis Obispo County is where we're located, he went to Cal Poly and continued the construction business and did more of investment in real estate. And then I picked up where he left off and started running a construction company. So that's kind of my background. I've had times when I have worked for others, obviously, but I've spent a vast majority of my adult life as an entrepreneur or self-employed. So that's a lot of my frame of reference. Okay.
And I don't know that we've ever actually talked about this, but what were some of the other jobs you had in your career leading up to this?
So briefly, coming out of high school, I'd grown up construction sites, working in construction, and so I didn't know any different. So that's what I did, other than making that classic stint working at some, diner. I worked at a fish market and so forth. But I ended up really struggling physically. And so I ended up going back to school and getting a degree in robotic engineering. And I spent about 6 years designing industrial robots out of Sacramento. A lot of fun. In fact, some of the processes in which I apply how we do our business are a translation from what I had to do in engineering and running an engineering business, because it was a small engineering firm, to also how I organized my construction business. So that was actually some valuable lessons brought across. I ended up coming back to the construction industry because, honestly, about family. My life is very family centered, and I wanted to be closer to the rest of my family. And my dad was in desperate need of that kind of help, and so I came back to that business and chose to put my heart and my business mind into that field.
I'm curious, what were some of those process related things you learned from robotic engineering that apply to running a small construction business?
I think one of the first things that is probably the most powerful, and that is a phrase we call second set of eyes. And I've heard it in other industries in different ways, but it really didn't matter what the hierarchy was within the business, or what, if we designed something, it did not go to production. It did not get even sent out to the machine shop unless there was a second set of eyes. A bid didn't go to a client without a second set of eyes. Everything had a second set of eyes, even if it meant the lead engineer had my eyes on it. And so bringing that to the construction business, where every time an estimate is produced, you don't just make an estimate and then send it out to a client. You always have a second set of eyes that looks at that estimate. You don't review a set of plans and make a takeoff without a second set of eyes reviewing your takeoff. That was just a critical thing, because we always have errors. We always have things we miss. And so that has been a real lifesaver. It's really been helped a lot when it comes to not missing profit things when you have someone else looking at your work. So I think that's probably the number one thing.
And let's talk a little bit about what it was like to come into the family business and step away from robotics engineering and step into the family business. What What were some of the big challenges that you faced when you made that transition?
Well, first off, am I going to live up or measure up to the standards of dad? Right? I know there are guys who've taken over a business from your family. That's a lot of weight, and I'll admit that. I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and it was talking about, and I'm going to butcher it, but what things get in the way of you actually moving forward and doing what you want. The I can'ts and I won't, and I don't know how get in that way, and I was processing that and realizing for me that was impactful in this area because I was afraid to fail. I was afraid that I would drop the ball. I would not get it right. I would, let them down. Didn't want to do that. So that really crippled me in a lot of ways. And then the other one was to come in and recognize that there are, when you grow up in a family business, and there's sometimes generationally, there are things that you just do, but you don't necessarily get them well communicated. And so if it's no longer structured as a family business and you're having more employees, you're growing, which is what you should do. You grow. And you've got employees that weren't raised in that culture. They weren't raised in that environment. And you have never really, you've been somewhat lazy in documenting the way you do things. That would be a good way to describe how I found the business and some of my own internal habits. I jump ahead a little bit, but part of what you have helped me with, Todd, is recognizing, oh my goodness, the reason why that's there is because I didn't even see it. It was a blind spot. I don't have that well communicated. That's not documented. It isn't something that I didn't already have or understand. It was just there because, my brothers and my dad already knew. We didn't need to talk about it. Well, none of them are working for me now. They aren't a part of the plan. So, that was definitely a challenge.
What advice would you have for a second generation, somebody who's a second generation and they are planning to step into business ownership or are in the early stages of stepping in? What advice would you have for them? Either things to make sure and don't do, things to watch out for, things to make sure you do, that kind of thing.
I can't emphasize enough that you bathe the whole thing in patience and long suffering. There is no escaping that there is going to be assumptions and errors, hurtful things that are said, things that are presumed, emotions that shouldn't be anywhere near your business, but they just are. And you can logically think this shouldn't be there, but it is something that you're challenged by. And so in the midst of that, there's no such thing as not communicating enough. Making time to set aside what would seem like, why are we doing that? We know, we talked about that, haven't we? We all understand. Well, really? Do you? Do you all understand? Are you all on the same page? And taking that time to clearly map out. We think an accountability chart's important. It's exponentially more important within a family business because you have relationships and emotions that are tied that are not going to go away. You blow it with an employee and you screw things up and, they leave and that's not good and you have to hire someone new. You try that with family, you're talking about forever. So, you know how some people say, well, let's do it on a handshake and we'll work out the details. I actually say that with friends and family, it's even more important that the details are ironed out and written down because that relationship is so much more important to you. That seems hard, but it's difficult, but that is what makes a difference. And getting out open the kimono and getting out and saying, hey, listen, it makes me uncomfortable, Dad, when you show up and do this. I'm having a problem with this. You're saying this is my responsibility, but you're stepping on my toes. And being able to put a format together. I think the first few times I did this with my dad was we actually had to do it in a public place. We were in a restaurant. We sat across the table from each other and we laid out some of our concerns and our hurts and our frustrations and the things that we thought were hindering the process. Some of it was personal, some of it wasn't. but just laid it out there in a place where just the environment around us encouraged us to maintain our cool and act like adults. So that's it's very valuable.
Yeah, that is so counterintuitive. I think most people would think, well, we're family, so we don't need to do that. But what you're saying is, because you're family, that's why you need to put everything in writing and clearly articulate expectations.
Absolutely. I couldn't say that more firmly. And yeah, if you doubt that at all, contact me. I'll explain to you what has gone wrong if you haven't already experienced it in your own family business.
Solid advice. So let's talk about failure. One of my favorite questions is, how has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success?
Yeah, when I saw this question, it just really strikes me. I think failure. Yes, many failures. Many. I fail perpetually. But failure is not a bad thing. And I know you've brought this up before, but it bears being reminded. We've created a negative stigma around the idea of failure. Failure simply means you tried and found a way that will not accomplish the intended goal. That's not a problem. And I honestly, I'll admit to you, I mean, it ripples to my parenting. I raised my older kids this way, and I was really hypersensitive about my own failures and theirs, and it crippled them. And I'm rebuilding that. And with my youngest, I've changed that philosophy, and I'm watching her flourish. And I connect that together because your team is going to function that way, the same way. Your clients, if they have the feeling an opportunity to fail, it's okay. I think of a couple of key things. Use the example of a train. A train is perpetually failing. You recognize that, right? The track is continually telling it you're going in the wrong way. But because it doesn't fight it, it takes the yes, you failed, and keeps correcting it. The train goes in the correct direction. Imagine if a train said, hey, I'm tired of you telling me I'm failing, and rejects the track and goes off track. We know what's going to happen here, right? So we embrace that failure. Failure is part of that process. Another of my favorite examples is safety glass, because it's kind of in our industry, right? Are you guys familiar with this one? Safety glass was invented when a clumsy materials researcher knocked over a beaker off a shelf. He noticed it had broken to pieces, but it was not into sharp, dangerous shards. He inspects it. It turns out the beaker hadn't been washed properly. Okay, so someone makes a mistake, hadn't washed it properly. And the plastic it had once held had coated the inside of it and kept the broken pieces together. Voila, safety glass. Total failure, right? And here's where it happens. All right. In the 1880s, there was a very precise, and I say this carefully because it was a precise, well-planned scientific experiment. So the idea that your failures are because you planned, I hear this phrase, and there is some truth in it. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? And it's true, but it's not categorical. Okay. In this particular case, this experiment was well planned. Many scientists went over this experiment. Is this going to work out? And it failed miserably. And without getting into the details, that failure led to our current understanding of relativity and quantum mechanics, of which we wouldn't have had without that failure. So it's just really key. I would say for us, one such failure was a lack of a well-written prime contract. It's been about 15 years now, but we lost over $50,000 during an economic time period when we really couldn't afford to do this. We were already in tough shape. And it was really simply because there was details missing in our prime contract. And I didn't know that. I didn't understand. It isn't that we didn't have one, that we hadn't thought about it, but it was a failure. All right. Since then, about once a year, we have our law firm reviewing our contracts, updating to the current laws. And so since then, I can just tell you, we have not had that failure, but without that, where would we be? So yeah, we fail regularly and we embrace it. I am trying to create a culture within our team that instead of hiding from your failure, we celebrate the failure. And I actually want to know about them as much as I want to know about the successes, so we can depersonalize the failure and together as a team work out how we're going to be better and grow from it. So the failure is not personal. It's really a positive thing. It's really powerful when you depersonalize that failure.
That's interesting. I was just having this conversation with somebody recently about celebrating mistakes, celebrating failure. So 2 questions. Why? Why would you want to celebrate failure? And then how do you depersonalize and celebrate it?
Well, I would celebrate failure, and we do regularly, because failure, first of all, means that you were brave enough to try and move forward. If you failed because of an absolute abandon to what you're supposed to be doing, you're probably not a part of our culture in the first place. But the reality is we're making an assumption that within this culture, you're wanting to get it right. And because of that, you may have a fear of failure because you so desperately want to succeed. All right. We're going to operate from that standpoint, not that you're lazy. All right. And so we're going to celebrate the fact that you actually were bold enough to go, you know what, I've done the time, I've made the calculations, I've gotten the advice, this is the right direction I believe to go in. You go in that direction and it doesn't work, it fails. We're going to celebrate that you did that. Now we're going to take and depersonalize it by recognizing that the goal wasn't just about you. You weren't all about you. You were about the team. You were about the client. And so, okay, all right, great. Thanks for being the point man on that particular experiment. You took point. You went in that direction. It didn't work. Now let's all come together and evaluate how it didn't go well, and go, all right, well, how can we approach that better? And it's not about a you, it's we,
So you mentioned a word that's behind a lot of these problems, which is fear, this fear of failure. Why are we so afraid of making mistakes? What do you think?
I think that we take it personal. We recognize and assume that failure means that we are a failure. And maybe some of us have a background where that is what it was, whether it be the way you were raised or previous employment. And you need to reconcile with those lies. And what I would say is those feelings are real. I mean, I got it written on my wall over here. Those feelings are real, but they're not telling you the truth. The condemnation you've put yourself under is real, but it's not telling you the truth. You're not a failure. You're not defined by those moments and those actions. And even if you've led a life that seems to look like a failed life, all of those have been lessons leading up to the success that you're about to experience if you're only willing to bravely embrace it. But you got to be willing to set aside those fears.
Yeah, that's good advice. That's a little unconventional, according to some people, which brings me to my next question. What's one thing you believe to be true about business that some might think is unconventional, maybe even a little crazy?
I wish I could say this was started with me, but actually it started with Lee Paxton, with Paxton Engineering when I was working in robotics. And it was a reality of being task oriented as a company completely. it's a little unconventional. And what I mean by that is we have a general schedule for work hours, but if you communicate, we don't care if you start late, work from home, need to take a family day off just because. We have a lot of flexibility in how things happen in our company culture. The deadlines are the key. Ironically, we're told by most of our clients that they have never worked with a contractor that was so on schedule. Yet I don't regiment the time frames. I talk about deadlines and how we can accomplish them. And okay, so you tried to do that at home in your home office. You discovered you don't focus well. All right, let's shift gears and try another way. Or maybe we can help you set up your home office differently. Or maybe your family life is in a certain way where we need to change the way and the hours in which you work. We joke. I have one particular lady. She works here, and I mean, she never shows up before 10 a.m. It's just never. But sometimes she'll work late, and sometimes she'll work from her home office, and she gets it all done. She gets it done well. So I really don't care about when you clock in and clock out.
That would pull on the strings of some micromanagers' hearts, I think. How did you come to that conclusion? And did you have any struggles making that transition?
I came kicking and screaming, Todd. I tell you what, I come from an old school construction background where, I remember for the longest time, my schedule was 7 a.m. to 3:30. And 7 a.m. means that you need to be there no later than 6:45 with your tool belt on and ready to work. That's what that means. And then you clock in at 7, because you clock in at 7, but you're ready to work. And the moment you work, and then you've got that 10-minute break and you're back to work, and you've got a 30-minute lunch and you're back to work. And when you clock out, you're gone at 3:30, you are out of there. And being late, I remember being docked, and I remember being told, you're going to get fired if you're late one more time. And I'd only been late once, and the second time you're going to get fired. And this is the culture that I grew up in. So it was very difficult for me because I perceived that an efficient and effective company ran on the clock like that. And if you couldn't measure up to that, then you basically said you didn't care about the team enough. You weren't a part of us. And so it was very hard to come outside of that company culture that literally defined part of who you were and your commitment to how you managed your clock. And I have been realizing that not only for myself, but to be honest, even as we're seeing a new generation, and one of the subject matters that sort of ties in is the question, like, how do you deal with millennials? I hear that. Well, not just millennials, but the generations beyond. This is not an approach that works well. I'm just telling you, we've found a great deal of more success when we bring in a company culture that says we care more about what's going on in the rest of your life. We have goals and that we all commonly want to address. It's what makes us all successful. It's not just about the company, it's about us all. And so let's get oriented towards getting these tasks done when they need to get done, and not worry about when they get done, within that time frame. And ironically, I found that same thing to be true. It's not just our employees, but my trade partners as well. When I create a schedule, I give them a window, and I don't micromanage how they get it done. This is the window that I've given you, and you get it done within that window. If one guy says, "Hey, Mikhail, you gave me a 4-day window and I'm coming in late. I'm not even showing up that first day, but I have no problem getting it done in the 3 days." Fine. Okay. And the previous contractor had just read him the riot act because of that. And I said, no, I'm fine. You get done when you say you're going to get done. I'm just going to hold you to your word. Your word is your bond. You get done when you say. That's all I care about.
Yeah, that does require some trust and extending trust to people, which I think that's the best way to go. And we could probably go down that rabbit hole and talk about micromanagement and what is a man hour and all that kind of stuff. But let's talk about what's been going on in your business over the past couple of years. How much has changed in your business in the last, say, 12 months? Maybe with the supply chain, the market, et cetera. And what have been the keys to that change?
Well, there has been obviously a lot that we've all been impacted by. I think some of what I was finding in our business was tied to something I referred to before, and that is just having a lot of the company vision and culture was just trapped inside my head and not out where it could be used and effective. So we spent a lot of time refining and documenting our process. The goal was to grow in profitability before growing in production. I didn't want to try to produce more just to make more, because that's bad math. It doesn't work that way. You need to refine your process, make what you have more profitable before you grow your production. So we targeted some clear failures. We had some lack of efficiency in areas like economy of motion. That's just recognizing where we were failing in that and creating better process regarding economy of motion. Clear, readily available process. Where is that process live, and how can people easily access it? Because if you're going to hold people to it, they need to be able to easily access it and use it. And that's where later we can talk about it when I bake it into the schedule. That was one of the solutions, was getting what was in my head into that location so that it could be referred to and it could be remembered and it could be viewed without a team member feeling like a failure because they forgot. All they have to do is go to the schedule to remind themselves of how we as a company do things. Okay. We also focused on our team's clear path of accountability. So there were no more holes in project estimates, procurement, or production. And which, as I say, those three things did have holes. We were finding little holes that were falling through, like what happened to the estimate here, or how come that didn't get purchased, or wait a minute, who's responsible for that? And having a clear path of accountability definitely plugged up quite a few of those holes. Now, I think, it seems like, well, Mikhail, you didn't address, our material shortages. You didn't address a lot of the current hot button issues. My attitude is yes, and I can go on about that, but I think we need to spend less of our time focused on what we can't change and more of our time focused on what we can. There's a lot of energy spent complaining and a lot of lost productivity spent, making excuses, when the fact of the matter is we should just focus on what we know we can do better. And, simple impact. Start communicating clearly to your clients about the fact that material shortages are there. Start creating longer lead times. Procure sooner. Make those adjustments. But those are solutions to a challenge that, if you're working efficiently and your processes are in place, it doesn't matter, because we're going to encounter new problems. Every year is going to be some new problem we're going to deal with. So that's been my approach to it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Doing all of those things make your business more resilient. And we've certainly had our share of body blows over the past couple of years with COVID, lumber prices, supply chain issues, 6-month-long window lead times, subcontractor shortage, et cetera. But you can take the victim approach and complain about it like everybody else does, which doesn't do any good. Certainly doesn't help your team. It doesn't help your customers any. You could just be neutral about it, or you can be proactive and do something. And then maybe even look at it as, this is an opportunity for us to add more value to our customers even. Yeah. So
absolutely.
We've been working together in my coaching program for, I think, a little over a year, maybe close to a year and a half now. What was the problem that you were having that led you to contact me about working together?
Well, some of it I already alluded to, but the reality is I needed help. Says number one, I really had no real accountability to do what I needed to do. I knew a lot of what I needed to do fundamentally, but I needed accountability. Second, I needed someone with the experience and skill to help me refine how to apply what I generally knew. So it needed a sharper edge. It needed to know, where's the actual bullseye for what you are understanding in general. All right. And your expertise and experience helped me refine that and target it to where it needed to go. And I knew I needed to get better tools for doing what I was doing. All right. And a better process document. So tools and processing, evaluating and resolving our company culture issues, client selection failures, and critical cash flow projection flaws. So it wasn't that there wasn't some cash flow projection, but it was not a well-oiled machine. There wasn't a clear process for looking at it and evaluate it rapidly, and those are some of the things that you helped me address, and that we're still obviously in the process, but it's doing a lot better.
Yeah, you mentioned accountability. I want to come back and make sure we talk about some work we've been doing over the past the first 3 months of this year with a group of guys for accountability. But what did that frustration feel like back then as you were trying to solve those problems that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I was thinking about this for a while, and I think I really felt like the engine was running, but I was not getting anywhere. I was preoccupied with getting the job done, quote unquote. I did not know when I was going to resolve what I knew needed to be done, and didn't know where to start. I was like, I know something's got to be done. I'm pretty sure I know what we need to do about it. I don't know where to start. What's the best place? And meanwhile, we've got to keep all this moving forward. So I was stalled out in that engine running fast mode, getting nowhere. And that was very, very frustrating.
And what were the ripple effects of that, either on other parts of your life, sleep, stress, your team, your customers? But what were some of the ripple effects of that frustration and what you were feeling?
Well, I just wasn't sleeping. To be honest with you, there was a lot of it was contained in my head, and it was not utilizing co-construct well, and other processes. I was trying to deal with all those challenges and problems within my head, and didn't even realize that they could be compartmentalized. They could be turned into a process and evaluated and put to rest. And I was reflecting on the rest of the team. The team was feeling it. They were feeling that stress. There wasn't clarity about exactly how they could solve or resolve the problems, where they fit into it. That was, I felt like an engine that was running. It wasn't like we were in catastrophic failure, but the engine was running, but it was really not going to go very far, very fast, for very long if we didn't do something soon.
So take us to the moment when you realized that the work you were doing in the coaching program was actually working or helping to solve your problem.
I'm kind of going to go back a little bit. I alluded to something that happened before, but we were reeling from that time from the impact of losing a project the week before we were planning to start. And the project total represented close to half of our annual revenue. Yeah. It would be an understatement to say that we were very discouraged when we started with you. We needed to regroup and reprioritize for sure. I was, as I said, not sleeping. And I remember, Todd, you asked me to go down that rabbit hole of worst case scenario. You remember that? And recognize and reconcile with it. So it was like, okay, if this is how bad it's going to get, how bad really is that? Is that really the end of the world? And can we reconcile with it, see the truth in it, and then start planning tangible steps towards recovery? And that's where you jumped in there and started making those tangible steps of recovery. The truth ended up being far less catastrophic than we painted it, or what I was feeling in the moment. We laid out a plan for moving forward, clear action items that Todd was holding me accountable for, without. And I'll admit to you, tell you, Todd, what I really appreciated about you is you not only held me accountable, but you didn't make me feel like the wreckage that I felt like. You helped me unravel from that, so I didn't feel like the wreck. And that moment, that time, I tell you when I knew. When I remember sleeping that night for the first time in many days, and that's when I knew I was on the right track. We hadn't arrived, but we were on the right track, because I could picture it. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I could see the action items. I knew where we needed to go. I could see we were making tangible progress forward, and that was huge for me. So, thanks, Todd.
My pleasure. How is life different now after the work that you've been doing over the past year and a half?
Well, we are far from where we want to be, but we've come a long way from where we started. So, number one, I'd say we have a great accountability structure within our company. Something that always leaves room for improvement, but I think we've set a schedule for regularly evaluating that, and making sure that everybody on the team is comfortable in the situation, and everything is being taken care of as it ought to, most successfully. Our processes are clearly documented and in a place that can be actively a part of every member of our team's daily engagement with the client, whether it's in the office or in the field. And in this case, it is, as I've referred to before, it's baked into our schedule. We have a clear and rapid way to accurately assess our cash flow and projection with the revenue maximizer. So, over the coming months, we know what's coming. We can see it and project it. And that's learning to properly use that revenue maximizer. That's been powerful. Our co-construct templates, we've spent a lot of time building and then refining. So we have a much more refined, and at this point now fully integrated into our process, co-construct templates, and that's been huge because it takes a lot of energy off of us. I've heard and with others, how much energy it takes for them to do it, but I want to encourage anyone who's at that critical point. It is worth the energy you put in it, because the dividend is multiplied back towards you. The amount of time you put multiplied back if you go ahead and get these schedules and templates built. Just do it, guys. We've also consolidated our entire lead management and communication into co-construct. So communication with a client is only in co-construct. Our lead management is in co-construct. And again, that's huge. You're tightening in your belt. You're giving yourself the ability to grow by being more efficient with every part of your process. So that's, does that mean our life is easy? No, but good news, we're in the black. Our team is optimistic, excited about what they're doing, and comfortable, I believe, in their roles with our company. So I've been sleeping at night. Move the needle, right? I'm sleeping at night. And I used to carry a lot around in my head that it now has a home, and I don't need to remember it all the time. So that's been huge.
Yeah, well, you and your team have done a fantastic job of implementing, and that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's what makes the needle move is implementation, and you guys have done a great job there. You mentioned sleep several times, and I want to talk about the Move the Needle Challenge in a moment. But at the Move the Needle Challenge, when you were reviewing your results, you made a statement that the revenue maximizer helps you sleep at night. Do you remember that statement? And if so, could you expand on that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's because it's funny, but it's true. The revenue maximizer helps me sleep at night. Sometimes when you're backing up as the business owner and you're looking at the big picture and you want to know what's coming, what do we have ahead of us? Are we covered? Do we have the projects we need? Have we projected to be able to make the money we need this year? Are we targeting the kind of margin we need to? And these things are rumbling around in your head when you're trying to sleep, and there's no way you can answer these kind of questions in your bed. There's just no way. But if you'd had the revenue maximizer and you've had a chance to look at it, and let's just say it was the day before, goodness knows, worst case scenario, I guess at 2 a.m. you can go look at it. You can remind yourself if you have to. But there it is. It lays out before you what you're seeing, what your course of action is. Even if it isn't the best, you know what you need to do, and you can lay your head down and go to sleep and go apply it in the morning. And that's been a big deal. The other little side part about that is knowing when enough's enough. If you look at what your projection and your goals are for your gross revenue for the year, and you look at your revenue maxing, and you have an optimistic outlook of that being met, then you could take a deep breath and remember you don't have to take another project. And I think, that ties in a little bit to, our company culture, and that is we are not profit driven. We are here to make profit because that's what a business does, but we're in the people business. And if we make the target for our revenue that we want, I'm not interested in trying to cram another job into this year just because I can find a spot for it. It just creates stress. So when I know that we're there, we're doing okay, I can just sleep at night, go, we're good. We've got this.
Good stuff. So let's talk about accountability. You recently participated in a group accountability challenge, the Move the Needle challenge, that culminated in a live meetup at Margaritaville in Hollywood Beach, Florida. What was most impactful about that? Whether it's the combination of the 90-day accountability challenge, the live meetup, what was most impactful about that for you?
Well, as much as I would say that I absolutely loved the live meetup, and I do, but if you want to talk about the actual impact, the impact was the accountability over that 90 days. The fact that there was a tangible written course of action, that I was accountable to people who I generally knew, and they knew me, and I knew we were in similar places in life. I wasn't going to be pulling the wool over their eyes, and I wasn't dealing with guys who weren't already experiencing what I'm experiencing. We're having the same struggles. And I was going to need to look them eye to eye, face to face, in person, and explain to them what I did. Motivates you that last little bit you need to get off top dead center and do what you know you're supposed to do. I mean, we're so busy putting out fires, we often forget to do not the thing that's urgent and important, but the thing that's important but not urgent. And that's where the Move the Needle does. It really helps to motivate and put a sense of urgency on the not urgent but important things that need to be done. All right. And so that's what it did for us. It did for me, allowed us to press forward, accomplish some of the things that I needed to do. And then the live meetup was like the cement and that glued all of that together, and the engagement with the other guys who had gotten where they did in their goals. And to my knowledge, everyone actually moved the needle. They did really well. Was everything 100%? No. Was there failure? Yes. I'm so glad there was failure. Failure meant we set the bar high enough. Failure meant we had something to talk about, to learn and grow with. And that was a huge part of the live meetup. Wasn't the celebrating always that you got it right. It was, hey man, help me out. I really busted my butt and it still didn't come out the way I wanted it to. What can I do differently? That's a big stinking deal. And that cements those goals and cements those relationships and brings about a solidified resolve to continue not just for 90 days, but to do something that's unusual with sometimes a short-term goal, and that is to take it the next level. Go, okay, how's this projecting into my year, or maybe indefinitely? I'm never returning to where we were before. I'm always going to do it differently now, and the live meetup kind of cements that. That was my feeling.
Yeah. Let's talk about the crack the code segment. Seems like you guys who have been at this a while have cracked the code on some things. So there are probably a couple of things, but let's say, what are one or two specific parts of your business that are working well for you that you'd be willing to share about? Let's start with the issue you were dealing with, and then what system or process, tool, hack, approach did you start using to solve it?
Okay. Well, this ties a little bit to some of the things I mentioned before about what I had in my head and how I built a business. If any of us have been out there as contractors, you're probably sitting here going, "Hey, I've been doing this a while. This is not new to me. There's a reason why I'm able to do what I do, and the skills that you've developed and that we had, but it's a whole other story to actually run a business doing it and to do it successfully and profitably over, decades, where you're now going through economic downturns and you're still there and surviving. And what does that mean? And so I had a lot of the things that was there, but they were not in a place that could really impact our team. So, the company culture that I grew up with and wanted to communicate was about investing in the lives of our clients and our team. Ironically, I would say, you talk about cracking the code. The most profitable solution for us has been to be team-centered, not profit-centered. This makes for a team that's energized, inspired to invest in their clients. The goal is to make lasting impacts on people's lives, but you got to be able to communicate that to your team. My grandfather's motto of service before self is great, but how do you get that across to everybody you're working with? My dad would always put it in terms of, we want to create win-win relationships wherever we go. So what did we start doing? We started working with a select group of trade partners and clients. We started being much more particular about who we work with. We didn't just go out to bid and grab some subcontractors. We became very particular about that. And that can take a risk, because if you're focusing on one, they'll learn that they might price gouge you, or what happens about availability. There's a lot of fears involved in that. But when we began to focus in on certain trade partners and begin to bring them in and be willing to train them and treat them like a part of our team, that gave them the desire to take ownership over projects. Even though they were just the trade partner, they began to own the project. Clients begin to feel that. And this begins to create a winning relationship. It's a win for my team, it's a win for our bottom line, and it's a win for our clients. I think I've mentioned it before, but we refined the reality that we all know this. Like right now, how do you find employees that can work? But we hire only who we can trust. Trust is absolutely paramount. But how often have you thought about the fact that you also shouldn't be working for anybody you can't trust? So we've started refining the reality of, we can't just work for whoever wants to knock on our door and ask us to do work. Just because they'll write us a check and sign a contract doesn't make them a client. They need to be someone we can trust. And refining that process of evaluating a client was key to lowering our stress and increasing our profitability. So a lot of that needed to get baked into our process. And so it got baked into our schedule, and it got, I had a baseline understanding of what a qualified client should be, but refining that into a clear list to follow, so that, I'm no different than I think a lot of contractors, where we want to make people happy. We want to say yes. We want to show that we've got what it takes to help them. But there's a lot of people that we have no business helping because it is not in their best interest. I was just in a conversation with one of our trade partners, one of our window suppliers, and I was sharing with them why they needed to say no to a mutual client, and that it was in the best interest of the client that they say no. And sometimes that's the mindset that you got to shift, that actually you're going to serve this person who you will never make money on best if you tell them no. And maybe you refer them to someone who's going to do a better job of handling them because you're not set up in a way that's going to serve them well. But either way, learning that was key to qualifying the clients. So,
yeah,
I think those are probably the keys.
That's huge. Being able to know who to say no to in the very beginning is often the best thing. There's one specific strategy that we spent quite a bit of time working on that I've shared with quite a few other people. They found is pretty remarkable, and it's what you call the flex track. Can you talk about the problem that led to developing the flex track and what the flex track, what it is?
Okay. Yeah. The problem is you. Well, there's a couple keys to this problem. I can't just narrow it to one statement. But let's just say you have a couple different things. You have employees that you feel a responsibility to. They are a part of your team. You don't want them to be without work, so you want to be sure that they have work. But you can't just generate work out of nowhere. And sometimes we have gaps. We have, particularly in our current situation, we have failure to deliver materials, or something happens, and what do? You got a week here, or a couple weeks here, or maybe even 3 or 4 weeks. It depends on how the situation went. And what do you do with your team, right? That's a question that we have to solve for it. More than a few days, you can start being concerned about losing your employees. Okay. Another problem that's going to tie into this is you've got regular clients that you work with, and they've been your client for a long time. And your business has grown. You've changed your model, and the type of project that they're bringing to you is not ideal. Doesn't fit well within the way you've structured your target market, the kind of what I would say your target zone of your most profitable projects. That doesn't fit. But what do you do with them? We all know you can't say no to them. You really need to find a place. These are your loyal clients, and they bring you lots of different kinds of projects over the years. So how do you handle that? All right. And then the last one is there are new people out there who come to you that nobody's wanting to serve. They're desperate. They'll sadly they're willing to hire somebody who has no business being in the trade. And you know that you can take care of this person well, but you just don't have it in your schedule to do. All right. What they have is relatively simple, but it's just not the target project for you. All three of these scenarios are addressed in a flex track, and it puts the decision back on them, puts the power of decision, which I've always been a firm believer in structuring things that make the decision the client's decision. And where it's never a yes or no, it's an A or B solution. So for the client, what I'm presenting to them is the opportunity for us to do the work for them, but they must be flexible. And for each one of a company, it may be different for you how you define flexible, because you have a different model than we do. But in our case, I needed to define flexible in a way that did not involve my staff getting involved with a lot of selection management, didn't get involved in a lot of travel, needed to be non-invasive in the client's world. And I could go on, okay, but I won't. You need to spend time with your list and determine what is the least impact. And you're going to fail. You're going to fail at this, and then you're going to refine your flex track list of qualifying who gets on that flex track. But if they are willing to run the gauntlet and qualify to be in that location where, we might be short notice, it'll be show up in a week. Something you've got all your materials on hand, contracts signed, purchase deposits been paid, everything is ready to roll, and when we can, we show up. Or we have a deck job coming up, and again, a deck has one selection, so it doesn't involve the in-house team much. There's not a whole lot involved there in selection management. But one of the criteria for their job to happen within a relatively decent time frame was it actually is getting split into two. I normally would not want a project to get delayed, all right in the middle of it. But this job is openly got a 2-week delay in the middle of it. And the reason why is because they recognize I need to take my crew and go do something for 2 weeks. And they've accepted that. It was eyes wide open. We're coming in fundamentally and doing the foundation work and a retaining wall and doing that part of the job, and then coming back and actually building the deck secondary. And normally a client goes, "Where'd you go for 2 weeks? You can't just disappear on me." And so instead of actually doing that, where some people are, they don't even realize they're doing that to clients. We're going to openly do it. We're going to let them know, hey, this is how it will work. If you're okay with that, then we'll move forward in our flex track. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I'm sure there's more to go into it, but that's how we've created it. And it's a separate job track that we'll keep track of, and is a great place for keeping clients to be able to keep them at work and provide people the professional service that we are going to provide them, as long as they're willing to effectively wait and be flexible with timing and how we go about the project.
Yeah. I love the flex track because you have your A priority, your ideal projects in your world, whole house remodels. And you have a few of those that you want to schedule around. And then you have your flex track, the projects that are not quite perfect, not your ideal project, not on your wheelhouse, but they're profitable. They keep people busy and they fill in bubbles in your schedule. If a project gets delayed,
yes,
you can slide these flex track. They're flexible. So you can slide them in if a project gets delayed, if a permit gets delayed or something. You have this hopper full of flexible projects that you can drop down into your production slot. And it's all about setting the expectation. So this approach works for custom home builders. If you're a custom builder building really large projects that take 15 to 24 months, you might look at large remodel projects as a flex track. Maybe it's not what you're really looking for, but what it does is it keeps your people busy. It generates gross profit to go toward overhead and takes care of repeat clients, so they don't go somewhere else. Yeah. So lots of benefits there.
Correct. I think one of the things I just remembered, a question that came up in our Move the Needle when someone asked me was like, so how long have you had people wait or delay? And I mean, you're going to have to decide how you handle that. But, that's part of it. Sometimes, you just have to give them a general and you have to be willing to change that. And that's part of it. Go, hey, listen, I think we can get you in this quarter, but I can't promise you that that's going to happen. And if you're not comfortable with that, I totally understand you getting somebody else to do the job. But I will tell you that once we commit to doing it, we will get your project done. I promise you. And again, regular communication is key. Let's just say you told someone that they're on your flex track and they're targeted for, let's say, third quarter. Somewhere in the third quarter, we've got a possible, because you've been looking at your co-construct schedules, where you have a possible window where something's going to happen. And what do? There's not enough of a space to stick a prime job in, but you got this. And so you're watching that and you're communicating with them. Okay, this is where it's at. Yes, it was going to be showing up in this week. Well, it looks like it's moved about a week. Are we still on track? Yep, we're on track. Because you just kind of keep them in the loop as that timing approaches. And they get excited because now they realize you're serious about taking this care of them. You didn't just throw them to the breeze. And so we've actually had a flex track projects turn into some pretty awesome prime projects because of how we handled such a little project for them. So this is also ties into your marketing side of things.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing you say is the keys are to understand what constitutes a prime project and what constitutes a flex track project in your world. Articulate those expectations to the customer upfront. Let them know upfront, this is how we'll do it. We'll do it under these conditions. We can't guarantee a start date. We'll let you know, and then communicate with them effectively, consistently. Let them know what's going on. And I think there's probably some fears and misconceptions about that, like from people who've never tried this. Just like people who don't believe you can get paid for pre-construction work and think you have to do free estimates. They think, well, nobody will ever pay for free. Nobody will ever pay for estimates when other guys are doing it for free. Or they're probably thinking, well, nobody would ever sign a contract without a firm start date. Well, let's talk about how do you feel about free estimates, first of all, Mikhail, and then we'll talk about some of these misconceptions about the flex track. Do you do free estimates? How do you feel about that?
Never, ever. Not even for a flex track. So don't get me wrong, not even flex track. In fact, sometimes, there is either a conceptual design contract that we start with or a professional service agreement, either way. But there is no such thing as a free estimate because that time is not free. Somebody has to get paid.
And what would you say to the people? There are people listening who think that's impossible, think that's crazy talk to charge for estimates. What would you say to them? Why is it in their best interest to start charging for pre-construction and estimating?
I'm going to be blunt. I don't think you value your own time. I don't think you recognize your own value. And I don't want you to become arrogant or proud about it, but you need to be confident that you are the professional that you are. And in what other field? Name the field of professional that would allow you to walk into their time frame and they're going to give you free. Doesn't work that way. Why is it it's okay in this profession? It starts with your own value of yourself. Have the confidence to know that you know what you're doing and it's worth charging time to give them what you know how to do. Okay. And then the second is if you feel like that's not going to work or you've tried it and it's failed, then you need to ask, what is the client base that I've been targeting? You need to change the client base. And maybe that entire perspective will completely revolutionize your business. If you picked the best client you've ever had, just think of the absolute best client you've ever had. And then think if you could just clone them, just duplicate them. And that was just all of your clients were exactly like your absolute best client. What would it look like? How could you target only them? And then ask yourself this question, would they have paid you for an estimate? I'll bet you they would have. I'll bet you they'd have paid for that estimate because they're that kind of client and they care about you just as much. And that puts you in a position of a win-win relationship. If you don't charge for your estimate, you're already starting off on a losing relationship. That's not a good way to start a relationship.
Good advice. So back to the flex track, what were some of the misconceptions, or maybe misconceptions is not the right word. What were some of the concerns that you had before you pitched the idea to your first flex track customer?
Well, that they were just going to walk away. But to be honest with you, I'll be honest, I was at a point where I almost didn't care. I'm like, well, this is either going to work in this context or you're going to go find somebody else, because I literally do not have time for this at all. But then I realized that it was also selfish of me not to find a way to serve them. There's got to be a way to serve them. But I wasn't going to compromise the rest of our projects. And I think that's another thing. It's like the misunderstanding that it's going to compromise the rest of your projects. Well, if it is, then it's not a flex track. By very definition, a flex track project is not going to compromise your prime projects. Okay. So if you fail and a flex track it really puts a hiccup in your prime schedule, then okay, lesson learned. That type of project or that type of client is not a flex track project. It's not the idea that failed. It's that isn't a good flex track project for your company.
Great advice. I love the idea of the flex track. Well, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience and your wisdom and the things that have worked for you, and for sharing about the Move the Needle Challenge and working in the coaching program. If somebody wants to connect with you or follow you on social media, go to your website, learn more about you, what are the best places for them to do that, Mikhail?
Well, I think for starters, just you can go to our website, which is gannageconstruction.com. That's GANNAGE construction.com. You can email me directly if you want, and that's going to be Mikhail at gannageconstruction.com, MIKHAIL. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, so you can follow some of the stuff we're doing. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And Todd, I really appreciate you inviting me here. This has been fun, and honestly, I love to see investment in the other people that we're working with, and I hope that I can continue to learn from you and from others. I really enjoy the collaboration that we have amongst many of us, and it's just been a real pleasure.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you being part of the group, part of the Builder Mastermind group, part of the Move the Needle Challenge, coming to the live meetups and sharing and participating there. It's been great. So thanks again for taking the time to do this. And I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I have one challenge and one request for you before you go. Here's the challenge. What is your 5-minute action item from this podcast? In other words, what is one thing you want to implement in your business or on your projects that will take you 5 minutes or less? My challenge for you is to create an action item as soon as this podcast is over and do it. Send yourself a text, send yourself an email, put it in your planner, write it down in your unicorn journal, whatever it is, but take action on something from this podcast episode so you get some real value from it. Now, here's the request. If this podcast has been valuable to you, please leave a rating and a review. Here's how to leave a review on Apple Podcasts on your iOS device. Number 1, open up the Apple Podcast app. Number 2, go to the icons at the bottom of the screen and choose search. Search for this show, Construction Leading Edge. Be sure to click on the show, not the episode. Then scroll all the way down to ratings and reviews, and finally click on write a review. These instructions will also be in the show notes. If you could leave a rating and a review, that would mean a lot to me, and it also helps get the word out there to other folks. And don't forget, if you want to get out of your business and make it run without you this year, go watch my free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt. I'll see you next time. Remember, with Company Cam, there's no more second guessing about what's getting done or pestering your crews to send you pictures. Every photo and video your guys take at a job is automatically organized by location and instantly synced from the field to wherever you are. Now you'll know exactly what's happening across your company. Get started today at companycam.com/CLE. If you own a construction business, I want you to imagine this. Imagine that your team is solving problems quickly, with fewer mistakes, and without you. In other words, they're taking ownership. Your phone is ringing a lot less with questions, you're getting a lot fewer emails, and fewer problems are landing in your lap. You have time to think, time to operate strategically and be proactive. You have time and the mental bandwidth to work on the business instead of being stuck working in it. Your projects run more smoothly. They start on time. There are fewer fires to put out, and you finish them on schedule. You know what you want your business to look like 2 years in the future, and you have a plan to get there. If that sounds good to you, I would invite you to check out my free online training workshop titled Get Out of Your Business, How to Make It Run Without You This Year. You can watch it free by going to constructionleadingedge.com/get out. Here's what you'll get out of this webinar. You'll learn your first few crucial steps if you want to spend more time working on your business instead of being stuck working in it. You'll learn 3 things you should absolutely do before you make your next hire. You'll learn a proven process to design your construction business for the future, how to motivate your team to take more ownership and solve problems without you, and a lot more. You can watch the free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. And if you want to work with my team to systematize your construction business, go to that link, watch the video, and click the button to schedule your strategy call with my team.